Hello, this is Jonathan Nituch with Procept Associates. In this video we're going to talk about the balanced scorecard. So balanced scorecard is another one of the new techniques to BABoK version 3, and this one is BABoK section 10.3. Balanced scorecard. So balanced scorecard is a strategic planning tool. That's the first thing to understand. It is a strategic planning tool, and we're familiar with the idea of a scorecard, right? Some rankings, how are we performing, this kind of idea. But let's talk about this idea of a balanced scorecard. So balanced scorecard really considers 4 separate dimensions. So those 4 dimensions are financial dimension, customer dimension, internal process dimension, and learning and growth dimension. The balanced scorecard was developed by a couple of professors. I believe they were from Harvard. And what they noticed is that our measures in our organizations were largely financially based, right? And they developed the opinion that those financial measures were not enough. It wasn't enough just to measure our financial performance, and that those measures were actually created almost for a bygone era, right? That financial measures were very good for manufacturing and those kind of things. But by the time, I think this was kind of the 1970s or 80s, that we moved into a little bit more of a knowledge workers, knowledge-based economy, the kind of the financial metrics that are more centered around, production, inventory, these kind of things, use of raw materials, that those kind of accounting practices, still valid and still important, but didn't really provide a clear overall picture of the performance of our organization. So in response to this discovery, they developed a balanced scorecard, right? And these 4 dimensions, 3 of which are non-financial, right? So we have the financial aspect, but we also want to have some metrics and measures, scores, about our performance with our customers, right? So maybe those could be customer satisfaction measures, complaints, are we acquiring new customers, the net promoter, whatever kind of metrics we choose to establish for our organization, but something to measure, the customer experience or how we're doing with customers. The third dimension that we want to look at is internal processes. So how are our internal processes? Are they improving? Are they becoming more mature? How well are they working? Efficiency, effectiveness. We talked about some of those things in some of the other videos, right? But how are our processes performing? And then finally, learning and growth, and a lot of this is about our people. So are people becoming more educated? Are they becoming more capable? Are they able to do more? This kind of human development, sometimes you'll see on some scorecards also, product development is in there in terms of innovation and those type of things in terms of learning and growth. But again, a whole separate section. So having gone through these 4 types of categories, we can see now why we call it a balanced scorecard, right? It's not just about the bottom line and those kind of financial metrics, but we're going to look at these other elements because they are truly important measures for the health of our organization in terms of a modern organization, operating here in the 21st century. That's why we call it a balanced scorecard. So if we were to look at, how do we make use of this for strategic planning? So we're going to look at the example here of learning and growth, right? So that's one of our 4 dimensions. We're going to have the other 3 can be present as well. So for learning and growth, what are the objectives? What are the things that we're trying to achieve, right? So these are some higher level objectives. How do we measure those objectives, right? So it's a scorecard. There has to be a quantitative measure that we can apply towards those objectives, and oftentimes there's going to be more than one measure that we use to assess how we're performing against that objective. We have a target, so we might have a future-based target, right? We want to increase this by 20% or decrease it by 10% or add 1,000 or remove 500. What are the targets? What is it that we're trying to see? How are we trying to trend and move that number? And now we can see very clearly why this is a strategic planning tool, because the last column here is what are the initiatives. So what are the projects, what are the changes, what are the things that we're going to undertake that's going to enable us to meet those targets. So we can see that this is a complete strategic planning tool, right? What are our objectives? How do we measure those objectives? What are we trying to target and reach for those measures? And what initiatives do we have in place to affect those changes and meet those targets, right? So it's completely, aligning and connecting all of those things for us. So a very clear strategic planning tool for our organization. What I really like about the balanced scorecard is that it's simple and small. It's very quick and easy to, certainly you have to choose good measures, but it's quick and easy, I think, to understand a balanced scorecard when it's presented to you. It's pretty clear, it's pretty laid out pretty well, and it is kind of small and compact, right? So that it's not a 30-page, strategic planning document. It might fit on one page with a small font, or you might have, some extra pages to get into those details. But it's pretty clear and small, right? So simple and small, I think, are the biggest benefits of the balanced scorecard. Some things that you want to consider as a business analyst if you're facilitating this is the frequency. So how often do we perform those measures, right? The measures have to be timely. So some measures, are we going to perform them weekly, or are they going to be monthly, or are they going to be quarterly? The shorter that frequency can be, depending on the cost of producing and calculating that measure, the more frequent that measure can be, the better it can guide the activities of our organization. So you'll see some organizations have, the scorecard as a weekly thing. The second thing we want to think about is, for those measures, are they leading measures or are they lagging measures? Most of our financial measures are lagging, right? We sort of work for a month, then we gather up some bills and so on. We do the kind of the month-end process and say, here's how we did last month, right? So we're we're always lagging behind what is currently taking place. So it's a good idea in our balanced scorecard to have a mix of those kind of lagging measures, but also to introduce some leading measures. Our leading measures are usually kind of an activity-based measure. So, if we want to know, a proxy or a good metric for our future sales might be, well, how many sales meetings are we having? How many customers have we encountered? How many prospects have we identified? So this week or this month, right? So some leading indicators that are going to tell us, we've got this much going on right now. That's a good guide for what might be happening later on, right? So leading and lagging, have a good mix of those two types of measures. The last thing to mention with the balanced scorecard and these 4 dimensions is that there's actually a little bit of a hierarchy between those dimensions in terms of how you invest and how they affect one another. When you have initiatives where you're investing in your learning and growth, those are, I will say 2 things. They're foundational investments. Investments in learning and growth improve your processes, improvements to your processes, improve your results with your customers, and improving your results with your customers improves your financial results. That is kind of the chain and hierarchy of how these 4 dimensions are related to one another. That has a couple of implications. It means that the further you are in that hierarchy, so if you're doing a foundational thing like learning and growth, those investments, number one, can have, I would say, a more profound impact, right? So if you look at organizations like Toyota, very focused on that kind of learning and growth, that's actually where they focus their attention, and they know that everything else will follow, right? So that's where they choose to invest a lot of their initiatives. But it also is a very long-term view, because investing in people takes a long time before that will impact perhaps your bottom line, right? Because the people have to affect the processes, which affect the customers, which then impact the bottom line. So investing in your people is more of a long-term investment. So our balanced scorecard, we should probably have some initiatives in all four areas, but we understand how those different dimensions interact with one another. Thanks for your time here today. Once again, this is Jonathan Nituch from Procept Associates. If you had any questions about this content or about this topic, or would like to learn more about this topic or other business analysis or project management topics, please visit our website, take a look at the courses and training that we have available there. Thank you.